Greetings. I am Magdalen. I've been in the SCA for over 25 years, but somewhere under 30. I am a pelican and a herald, and I have had the good fortune in my experience to be able to herald a number of tournaments over the years. And because this was a martial collegium, I thought it made sense to talk about tournament heraldry specific, but there are 4 types of heralds. The non-vocal heralds handle what we call book heraldry, and they're the folks who register your names and your devices so that you can eventually have your coat of arms. Silent heralds are also non-vocal, and they are our sign language heralds. And at the end of the handout that you see that I have, it'll show you the Herald's badge, which I got here on my necklace, and it has an open palm on the middle, and that's for silent heraldry for our sign language interpreters. Mostly what we're going to be talking about today will be vocal heraldry, and the 2 categories of vocal heraldry are field and court. And obviously, with tournaments, it's mostly field. But on occasion, you will have court in the middle of the field. So both are vocal, and those will be the 2 types of heraldry that we'll mostly be talking about today. This is an image from an illuminated manuscript, and it's showing a herald with his tabard and his sword, and he is fully armored, ready to go so that he can support his fighter or his lord. Obviously, in the Middle Ages, we had a very feudal system, and obviously in the SCA, we try to follow that to a looser degree. And so a herald would be the vocal announcer for his or her lord and or lady in this case. So there are, of course, female fighters, and any tournament heraldry, if you are the herald for your king, for example, you might wear the king's arms on your tabard. Modernly, and I say that in the sense of the SCA is 55 years old, and in the last 10 to 20 years, heralds have drifted away in some kingdoms from wearing tabards. Often they will wear the style of clothing of their lord or lady. And so if your lord is a Viking or a Norse persona, you might wear Norse garments, either a Swedish style or some Norwegian style clothing, as opposed to wearing full Elizabethan if your lord or lady is of an earlier period. If your lord or lady is of the Elizabethan Tudor period or something of that nature, then you might wear a full Tudor outfit and not necessarily wear a tabard. Now, that I am hailing from the Kingdom of Atenveld. We are the 4th kingdom out of 20 mighty kingdoms in the society. And Atenveld has the sun as its heraldry for a reason. It gets very warm here, even in the winter months. It can be in the 80s sometimes, just because of the temperature gradient. And so tabards are extra layers of heat. And to be a good herald, sometimes we don't wear our tabards so we don't pass out from being overheated. It is crazy, but it is true. Other places, the customs of your land is where you should kind of focus when you're thinking about how to present yourself as a herald. And also, ultimately, your lord or lady who you are employed by, you may need to focus on what their desire is, because you're there to make them look good. And how you appear reflects on them, and how they appear, likewise, it's a give and take. So you want your lord to look good on the field, then you need to work on looking good on the field. I do have heralds tabards. I haven't worn them all in a long time, but in the slideshow, I'll show you a few images of that. I'm going to switch to the next one. Again, these are other heralds wearing their lord's tabards, and in this case, the gentleman on the Dexter screen with the orb, he has two different coats of arms being represented, and it is a marshaled tabard. Now, in general, you cannot register marshaled arms, but you can wear them as artistic license. So if you had two folks that you herald for, say the king and the queen, for example, you could marshal your arms and split them down the middle, such as the gentleman with the orb. Or in the other case, you'll see that the heraldry is mimicked on the sleeves, as in the front and also the back, presumably, of the tabard. And they have the three crowns as the primary charge on the heraldry. But again, it's the idea of a tabard is for instant recognizability. And these are some historical illuminated examples. The rest of my examples are photographs of my Lord husband, who is also a herald, and of myself in various tournaments over the years or situations as heralds. Ultimately, I consider myself currently a herald without any particular employer. I am not a titled herald, nor am I a specific herald to an individual fighter. So I would consider myself a herald at large, and anyone may title themselves as a herald at large, and that generally means that you are available to herald for anyone. Obviously, you and that other person or persons or households would need to work out the agreement, whether you're doing it for your singing for your supper, so to speak, whether you're doing it as a courtesy or for free, or whether there is some barter exchange that would come into play. In some tournaments, the autocrats or event stewards have worked out so that they could have heralds for hire. And the idea of a herald for hire is that they would have a group of individuals who are available to herald for anyone at that tournament. And for hire might mean for a token, please give me your sight favor or something. It could, as I said, the terms are generally not in coin or actual money. Usually in the SCA, we serve for the pleasure of serving. And usually we work for folks that we enjoy working for or want to enjoy working for in the future, so to speak. But if you are in a tournament that has heralds for hire, well, you might then be fought over. For example, if you are a known herald to be very good at your craft, you may find that 2 or 3 fighters will auction or bid for your services. And a lot of times, again, the herald for hire concept can be one where they actually do have an auction of sorts for the heralds, so that then the coin that is collected goes into the coffers of the event or goes into the coffers of a charitable fund or whatever notion they may have for the event. At our crown tournaments, we have a number of heralds, and of course they serve at the pleasure of our crown, and we are all volunteers. And of course, SCA its backbone is based on volunteers. So in most cases, you'll see heralds at large who are volunteering their services. You also have titled heralds who work for the barony or the shire or the principality or the kingdom. And those titled heralds vary by region. So in Adenvelt, for example, we have our principal herald, which is the overall herald of the kingdom. We have the crown herald, who is the voice of the king. We have the chaplet herald named for the chaplet of roses on our Queen's coat of arms. So the chaplet herald is the Queen's voice. In my barony, Turiskathir, which is modernly Tucson, Arizona, we have the Black Boar Herald. Our main charge is a boar's head, and it is a black boar, a sable boar. So the Black Boar Herald is the vocal herald and group herald for that barony. As I said, it varies from region to region, so you guys have any specific titled heralds in your groups that you're familiar with?
In Sundragon, we have the Prism Herald.
Oh, I love that name, Prism. It's perfect with the arms being the rainbow and the clouds. I love it. So again, there is an example there that the herald's title coincides with the heraldry of the group by being the prism of the rainbow. So I like that. That's pretty cool. That person can then have heralds underneath them or heralds that work with them. And that title is called a pursuivant or a pursuivant. Depends on how you pronounce it. I've heard it both ways. But the pursuivant is like the sous chef. They are the second in command. They are the assistant herald. They're the learning herald. They are the herald that is the deputy who takes over or assists the primary herald. And so pursuivants often are the heavy lifters, so to speak. They may be the one that does the court report at the end of the day or report to the list table their charge and the work that they're doing. All righty, so primary thing for heralds, of course, is we use our voice to announce. We announce and introduce those personages that we work for. So in this image, you'll see me. This was actually not for a tournament, but it has all the right trappings, so that's why I chose this photograph. You'll see behind me, there's the knight, and these are his arms. And that is Sir Finian. And the next image is his lady's arms, and she is behind the shield bearer, so it's hard to see her in this picture, but the camera person actually was taking kind of a group shot and they got me, so I'm using it. And I am announcing Sir Finian and Mistress Brigid, who were, they were stepping down from being the Baron and Baroness, or stepping up to be the Baron and Baroness of Mons Tenitris, a barony south of Turiskathir. And so, again, heraldry plays a prominent role with a herald. And again, when talking about dress, I'm not wearing a tabard in this image. As you can see, I'm wearing the heraldry, the livery though. So their colors as Baron and Baroness are black and white. So the gown that I have is black and white, and then green is the third color of the livery for the barony. And so I tried to coordinate to match the lord and lady I was announcing for. And that was due to being asked in advance to introduce them. And this is court more than field or tournament at this point, but this would be the same as if you were announcing a fighter and his consort at a tournament. On my notebook, it is a modern notebook, and we try to hide these things if we can, but in this case, I was reading off a document. But you'll see in the middle of the notepad or notebook, it has the kingdom heraldry, and that again, if you're going to have something that looks modern, if you can dress it up a little bit to be a little bit more period style, or at least to put heraldry on it to kind of mask that it is a modern notebook, that is helpful. If you can memorize your speech, I absolutely recommend it. I can tell you I get nervous every time I herald. and it is a natural, I think, feeling for most heralds to be nervous. Um, my nerves typically go away once I get into the course of it, but before I start, I kind of have to do a few things for myself to get ready to go. I like to have a notebook in front of me or a pad in front of me so that I can, if I have a blank in my, my mind and I lose track of what I'm about to say, having at least a couple of notes to jolt me back helps. I have been able to do a number of my introductions extemporaneously, not memorized and not written down, but just knowing who I'm speaking for and introducing them because of what I know of them and that I know who they are and things about their heraldry, things about their achievements, things about them as a fighter, things about their lady as a consort. And so I don't necessarily need a notebook, but I like to have it, as I said, and I will use the word crutch. That's the point of a crutch. It holds you up. So if you need that crutch, find a cool notebook or a cool book that looks appropriate and use it. In this case, like I said, it's a 3-ring binder, not the most appropriate, but it's what I had that day. All right. Moving down, this is switching just briefly to court because I realized I put these sort of out of order, but I think it's still helpful to, again, show this gentleman was visiting our kingdom. And I want to say he's the king of Artemisia, but I cannot recall. It has been long enough time. But he did not have a herald, and I was asked to introduce him. And this is tying back into introductions. Again, you show up to the event. If you think you might end up heralding, even if your first thought is, I'm going to fight early in the day, but by the late afternoon, I may not make it to the final round, I'm going to be announcing, or I know that I intend to herald for any number of my 2 or 3 friends who may have a chance at getting to final round. Have the appropriate outfit so that you're ready to go. Again, I was in a fortunate case of just having a decent coat hardie that I was wearing that I could come forward and look appropriate without a tabard, because again, this is a gentleman who is visiting Atenvelt. He did not have a herald, so he didn't bring a tabard for that herald. So again, just being appropriately dressed for an event. Don't wear your holy clothes or your worst garb. Wear nice garb or your best garb. And this, again, I was introducing him into court as he was going to sit court with our king and queen. This is at an event outdoors, but I put it in because this is the first king, Arthur O'Flaherty, who I was able to ever be the crown herald for. And so I put it in because he kind of gave me my start. I had been a local group herald. I had heralded a lot of tournaments, but I had never heralded for a king or queen before Arthur and Gabriella. And so I was very fortunate to get that opportunity. So I stuck that in there. And you'll see in my hands, I'm carrying a court book. It's not real clear in this picture because of the lighting, I guess, but it has the arms of Atenvelt on the book. And it is a very large book, large enough to hide 11 by 14 size scrolls. And so I typically, again, like to have a book with my notes in it. And so there we go for that. Introductions, though, let me move to that and be a little more specific. Introductions, and here I'm not using a notebook at all. I'm just holding paper in my hands, but this is a tournament. It's called the Night Light Tournament, and that's why it's at night. We have to pay for the lights in our local park, and so we have a fighters auction, and we introduce all of the fighters in the list And this is more or less a herald for hire type of situation, but we do it as volunteers. Um, in this case, we introduce both fighters on the rapier field as well as fighters on the hardsuit field, and also the youth fighters. We get upwards of about 30 to 40 fighters. And I must say that another thing other than being appropriately dressed, you should make sure to always have something to drink. In this case today, I have my Herald's mug with water. Water is my go-to, but if beer or some other beverage works for you, coffee for a lot of Heralds is the go-to beverage. Whatever works for you. I find having a mug that has a solid bottom so that you can set it on the ground and it won't tip over. Goblets don't work very well for a working Herald. I also like the broader the base, the better. Again, you want it to be stable. This is ceramic. I don't necessarily recommend ceramic. If you can get a wooden tankard or a metal tankard, they tend to last better and longer, but definitely as a herald, your voice is your instrument. It is the primary tool that you use to do your job other than your lungs. So I recommend be properly hydrated or to have your beverage of choice that will help you do whatever you need to do as a herald. A lot of folks also like different herbal teas, whatever again works. For me, water is the best go-to, and it's the quickest hydration for me. I do not recommend being inebriated as a herald. I've seen it done. I know that people do it. If you feel less intimidated or nervous with a little bit of a adult beverage, I'm not telling you not to drink it. I'm just saying don't get to the point where you're tripping over your words or slurring your words. You still want to be able to do your job and be articulate. Also, you don't want to have it be where any alcohol might impair you after you're done so that you can't function. That said, last but not least, a herald should have good shoes. I stand almost all day at a tournament. I rarely will sit, especially if there are a number of fields happening. You're going to go from field to field, or you're going to be going back and forth to the lists, or you may be working with runners who are running from the herald to the lists. Oftentimes, at least in Atenville and in most kingdoms that I'm familiar with, we use 3x5 cards to herald our field. So we'll get the list of all the fighters and their individual cards and who is paired with whom. And then our runners will take the winner and losing bracket cards to the list recorders at the list table. But some tournaments, we don't have runners just because of the nature of how things work out. And so without a runner, you may be yourself as the herald running to the list, which again, I recommend wearing solid and comfortable shoes for that purpose. And then I also can attest to if you are in a place where it is very sunny or you're prone to sunburn, having a good hat is another benefit. It will assist you, and you'll see me later on in a couple of other pictures with a straw hat. It keeps the rain off of me, it keeps the sun off of me. I don't sunburn so much, but I am prone to heat exhaustion. As I've gotten older, I have less tolerance to standing in the heat for long periods of time. So I can recommend if you need to sit, get yourself a sturdy stool. I have a 3-legged stool that I do bring to events. Again, I rarely sit, but I do bring it with me so that I have it available. If you'll see my Lord husband at different points has a cane He does not necessarily need it to walk with, but he definitely uses it as a heraldic mace to gesture to the fighters. He uses it for emphasis and will use it somewhat as a staff would be used. And sometimes he actually will carry a staff with himself as well. And he uses that as again, part of the props and items that a herald needs. All of these things are in the handout again, so you don't necessarily need it for the class, but ultimately, if you want to keep track of all the things I'm talking about, I did put that in the handout. So I also find that having my own notebook is better than using the group's handbook or notebook or anyone else's, because then I can keep my notes and I can write my notes and keep the organization that way. Having a good pen or pencil, I don't use pencil often. I usually just use ballpoint pens, nothing fancy, but having a pen that writes. Always having the ability to write the winner or the losing bracket on your cards, having the ability to write the phonetic pronunciation of the fighter's name on the card, because oftentimes you'll get someone with a Gaelic name, a German name, a Spanish name. If you have certain languages that you are strong in, then you will likely pronounce the names of those languages better. If, however, there are certain languages that you find challenging, and for me, I will arguably say it's the Gaelic languages, because you look at the words and they do not correspond to American English. They correspond to Gaelic. So whether it's Scots Gaelic, whether it's Irish Gaelic, whichever version, same with Welsh names, you get to practice pronunciation. But the biggest tip that I will tell everyone to use is, if you worry about pronouncing names properly, the best way to get to where you can do it well is to know who all the people are. In your modern work, you know everyone's name. In your family, you know everyone's name to the cousins, usually. In your hometown, you know different personages, whether it's the mayor or the council people or certain businessmen and women. You know the folks, all of the movie stars and actors on television. We come to know their names, and once you know it, then you can pronounce it properly. Once you know what they prefer to be called, then you call them by their name. I use an old example, but the actor John Wayne, his given name was Marion Morrison. And if you look at the name Marion, it could be a male's name, it could be a female's name. The name Jocelyn, especially in the Middle Ages, was a male name. Modernly, it's often more a female-focused name. So you need to know the people so that you know who you're talking about. And then once you know them, you know their names, you can pronounce their names. If you come to people that you do not know, you're a herald for hire or a herald at large, I find that the best conversation is to ask folks how they like to be addressed. What's your full SCA name is usually my question to people. And then they tell me, and then I say, but what do you like to be called? Because oftentimes the full name is not the name that they prefer. So we have a duke in our kingdom. His full SCA name is Cosmo Craven the Elder. Everyone knows him as Craven, without the Cosmo or the Elder. He prefers to be called Craven. Adding your grace, his title is appropriate. So you might say, Your Grace Craven. That's a much nicer than, Hey Craven, or over there is Craven. But he knows his name and he answers to it. If you announce him as His Grace Cosmo, he will look at you funny everyone else will go, who are you talking about? Because we have another knight in our kingdom who is Sir Cosimo, and he is referred to as Sir Cosimo or Cos. So to not mix them up, we call Craven Craven and Cosimo Cos, or Sir Cosimo or Sir Cos, and Sir Craven, Duke Craven. Yes, Fergus, you have a question.
Actually, Antonio Cifroza, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, but again, Heraldese kind of happens. In the chat, he has a question about how often do heralds typically work with fighters outside of the armored list? And also, does the activity in question change how field heraldry is conducted?
All right, let me find the chat because you said that really fast for me.
Sorry.
So let's go with the first question. How often do heralds work with people outside of the list? Do you mean in terms of, and if you go ahead and unmute and just, unless you don't mind talking to me, it's easier for me to just have a verbal exchange. So do you mean other than the tournament itself, are you working with other people you're introducing? Is that what you're asking me?
Mostly I'm talking more about the tournament style stuff and whatever kinds of things that you're doing with the heralds for the heavy fighters. Do you normally do those same kinds of things typically with, like, say, rapier fighters, equestrians, archers, et cetera, or is
okay.
heraldry only for heavy?
So definitely rapier fighters, I would say, are almost more interested in many regards to the formalities of introduction. And that's just, I think, due to the nature of rapier style fighting or fencing. Fencers are flamboyant by nature. They wear very cool garb. They like to look good on the field. They make an effort. I'm not saying hard suit fighters don't. I'm just saying that typically, for example, a regular tournament, the fighter is going to wear his comfortable hard suit armor. For a crown tournament, he'll step it up for a crown, but not necessarily just for a regular tournament. Rapier fighters, in my experience, they step it up for almost every tournament. And so as to heraldry, they prefer to have their full title. They often prefer to have their full name. So not used it rarely on the archery field, if ever. I would use introductions on the archery field more likely if the crown was visiting the archery field and we're letting them know who all of the different archers on the line are. And I have participated in doing that at least once at Estrella War, for example. But it's rare on a regular archery shoot that you would announce the archers. Maybe that's something we need to start thinking about doing. But I haven't seen it done much there. And then in Atenveld, we have a very small equestrian community. With equestrian, again, I have only seen announcing done at Estrella War. I would defer to other folks who maybe have heralded equestrian tournaments. I have not had opportunity much in that regard. Most of mine, again, has been hard suit armored fighters and fencers.
Definitely. That's more than helpful. Thank you so very much. And then while I have you here, the other question that I kind of asked in there is because you said your husband occasionally uses a cane or a staff in terms of the heraldry. I've seen lots of different pictures of heralds that all have either like a walking stick size thing or like a mini thingamajig like this long-ish. That's like painted like solid white.
Yes.
What exactly is the significance of that? And are they used like only in certain contexts, or are they just like a hand prop that the heralds have?
So it is a heraldic mace. It is literally a mace. I mean, if you were to build one out of rattan, you could probably fight with it. But usually they are just decorative and they are used for the purpose of indicating with your hand who is doing what. So I'm going to get to the photograph of Simon. So here is Simon with a cane. It is not a full staff, but he will use that to point to the victor of the tournament match, or to point to for the fighters, for example, if he's introducing the fighters on the field, he will point to the crown and say, "Salute the crown," and point in the direction of the crown of Atenvelt, because the fighters, of course, have armored helms on, or fencers have masks on, so he's giving them a direction to find the crown. Then he'll have them introduce or reverence their consort or inspiration for fighting that day, and then he'll point to each the other and point to the different fighters. So he uses it very much as a tool. He gestures with it. So it is a directional tool, like a police officer directing traffic. Think of it that way. It's just that it's an extension of your arm. So if you have a heraldic mace, and in fact, Terran the Wayward of Meridies, he just recently was taught me how to make a heraldic mace, because I don't have one, and so I'm working on it. What tools, just briefly, he used as go to your local Home Depot or home improvement store type of thing, and you can get table legs, and then you can paint them whatever color, because they're wooden. Some are heavier than others, so you probably want to balance, but they already have all of the decorative carving. And then he uses a different screw top on the top, and he'll paint the heraldry of his different employers on the top of his mace. After this class over, I will add his link to how to get to that. I didn't include it in this handout, but I will go ahead and get that information out to you guys. It's useful, and Terran has like one actual mace, but different tops, and he changes the heraldry on them depending on who his boss is. Real quick, this is the generic herald's arms. It is a green background with cross trumpets. This is my lightweight, throw over any outfit herald's tabard. It does not have sleeves, but it immediately identifies me as a herald, and I carry that around with me wherever I go. Even if I'm not planning to serve as a herald, I take it so that if I am asked and I'm needed, then I can throw it on. It is finally kind of given up the ghost, which is why I'm not wearing it today. So I need to actually upgrade my tabard. Another thing you can do, and just thinking about this as far as if you're wanting to make a tabard for working purposes, even if your primary vocation is fighter, but you want a herald for your friends, you can do one lord's heraldry on one side, and then reversible, do it on the inside, the other lord's heraldry on the other side. So you have a reversible. Simon has one that's got our kingdom arms, and then on the reverse side has the barony's arms. So you can make a tabard be a versatile outfit, just for the sake of argument. This photograph I just want to show because this does go towards introductions again. I keep kind of veering off, and I apologize. I'm a chatty person. But Simon is wearing the arms of Duke Edward Gostomsky, or Edward the Zealot, as he likes to be called. I got the idea to make this tabard. I made the tabard for Simon to wear. This is at a crown tournament, and Ed had been king once, so he was Count Edward at the time. And I said, hey, why don't we have tabards for Ed and his lady Osa, so that when we introduce them on the field, we'll be wearing their coat of arms. And we did it as a surprise for them. And by virtue of doing it in that fashion, we did in fact surprise the couple. He did go on to win that tournament and become king for the second time for his ducal reign. And we actually have never worn them since. But the impact of wearing them that day was that Simon and I were able, and let me get to the next slide here. I'm wearing her arms. This is Osa, and that's Edward. And they are wonderful people, but I have never seen him get a tear to his eye until he saw Simon wearing his arms. And this is the final round, and Simon is introducing him. And there is Duke Arius in the background there in the blue with the horseshoes. And it was neat because Edward had his herald there to be able to stand out and display his arms. And there's one other shot. He's still shouting on this one. And again, the reason Arius is in the background is that he's the opposing fighter of that final round of the Crown Tournament. So, introductions. Other than pronouncing folks' name properly, that is the key though, do your very best. If you make a mistake, this is important for all heralds. We have a duke in our kingdom. His name is Man. It is Gaelic in spelling and has about 9 letters, 10 letters in the name, and it looks like Magdalen if you were to phonetically try to pronounce the Gaelic, but it's pronounced Man. And I have, as many heralds in our kingdom have, made the mistake of saying Magdalen if you do not know him and you see it and you make a mistake. The best and easiest is I'm sorry, my lord or my lady, to whomever you're speaking or to the gentle person you speak to. Apologize, be sincere in your apology, and then ask them what is the best way to pronounce the name. And then I use my pen and I write on the card the phonetic pronunciation. It doesn't have to be a formal phonetic pronunciation. It needs to be shorthand that you will recognize since you are reading the card. So whatever the folks who have complicated names, definitely do your best. If at the beginning you know you're going to make mistakes, you can announce up front, I apologize in advance for any mistakes I might make in announcing you. I don't intend to make the mistake, and please correct me. And take it in stride. Every once in a while, and especially at crown tournaments, just so that you're aware, if you've never heralded a crown tournament, every kingdom has a crown tournament. Every crown tournament, the stakes are high because the person who is the victor that day becomes the prince, becomes the crown prince and the next king of your realm. The fighters are usually pretty intense. They are usually very much focused on the fighting. And yes, they care about the heraldry, but they don't care about the heraldry. And I don't mean it for any fighter. I don't mean to disparage any fighter. But the one thing that is super important about the heralds at a crown tournament is to not get in the way, not be a distraction, not be a problem. So if you can address the fighters before things get moving that day, talk to them before they get amped up, that's helpful. If you know in advance the list, which usually it is put out in advance, you can prepare in advance. If you know what all the fighters in the list are going to be, you can then take the time at home to go over everyone's name. You can take the time at events prior to the crown tournament to talk to those fighters and learn how to pronounce their names and not have to spend the day at that crown with people who are focused distracting them about how to say their name. Does that make sense? And I know that that's kind of like, well, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of homework. Well, if you have heraldry as your vocation, then it's an investment in your vocation to learn the tricks of the trade, so to speak. Other tournaments for championships, so to be the local group's hard suit champion or the local group's cut and thrust or rapier champion, those can be intense tournaments as well. I have not, in my experience, found the fighters to ever be as abrupt or stressed out as they are at a crown tournament. So I try to adjust my behavior as a herald to be professional. And I mean, I think of it in that term. Heraldry is my profession in the SCA, or one of a couple of vocations. I'm also a feast steward, but that's another story for another day. But that's the point. You don't talk about cooking while you're fighting, while they're fighting. You're going to try to get in and get out. If you have a quick question, I will also ask the consort information instead of bothering the fighter during a crown tournament. Now, consorts are also going to be intense. They're focused on taking care of their fighter and watching the various bouts, but they are a little more accessible during the fighting if you have a question about something heraldic related. Again, knowing the players makes a huge amount of difference, because some people are very open and want you to talk to them directly. Others are very intense and would rather you direct to their squires or someone else for information. So just kind of, if that's something you're focused on doing, definitely work on that. If you are drafted as a volunteer to help at a crown tournament or a high profile tournament in your kingdom, well, go for it. And simple courtesy is the way I look at it. Be prepared for on the off chance, and it does happen, that a fighter might snap at you or be unhappy with you. And again, simple common courtesy usually covers most things. Don't take it personally. Usually, again, it comes down to they're having a lot going on, and the last thing they need is you to mangle their name or mangle their lady's name or whatnot. But when making introductions, think about the time that you have available. Usually in a tournament, you don't have a lot of time. They need to get the fighting moving, and the marshals are going to be working hand in hand with you. So I always recommend, before the tournament starts, talk to the marshal in charge of the field. You need to know who that person is, because the marshals, by all ends and bounds, first of all, own the field. We are heralds. We are invited to work on their field. We are not the owners of that field, and we have to keep our minds kind of wrapped around that. I know it sounds subservient or somewhat maybe second class, but the reality of it is the announcer at a basketball game or a wrestling match does not own the basketball court. They don't own the ring. They are just the announcer within the ring or the announcer on the court. And then they got to get the heck out of the way so that the game can go on. So the same thing applies in tournament heraldry. A herald is essential to help us all get that emotional gratification of a medieval or Renaissance feel. All right, we are trying to help add to the ambiance of the event by our job, by our vocal talent and our skills and our style. Every herald has their own style. Some are comedians, some are much more comedic or funny, and that is cool because it lightens things up when it needs to be lightened up. Some are very formal and very forsooth in their presentation. And again, that adds to the ambiance, and you know their style. One of our heralds extraordinaire in Atenveld is Master Michaelis. Michaelis is known for his Elizabethan style, and he introduces everyone in iambic pentameter, and he's amazing. And it's really kind of neat to be introduced in rhyme. So if you have a certain tact or skill that you want to apply to your style as a vocal herald on the tournament field, I say go for it. I have equated heralding tournaments similar to being an MC and similar to worldwide wrestling. I mean, it is similar. You know, are you ready to rumble? I mean, people pay attention when they hear that. In the SCA, we've used that because it's fun, but it is a distraction to people who would like it to stay more of a medieval feel. So keep that in mind whenever you are announcing or you are speaking. You are not just speaking for that person that you are introducing. You are not just speaking for the king and queen. You are not just speaking for the consort who is being fought for, but you are speaking to and for the entire populace present. And sometimes you might even hear, I can't hear you. You know, people will shout in the cheap seats in the back. And you do the best you can. William commented that he can be very loud. I often will tell folks that if I mess up your name, not only am I going to mess it up, I'm going to make it very loud when I do so. I acknowledge it up front because, again, it lightens it up a little bit. But you can assess the mood. You can assess what pace you need to go at when you talk with the marshals. So if the marshal says to you, the king is aggravated because we're an hour behind and we need to get this tournament going, then you know that you do not have all day to sit and make flowery, flamboyant speeches. You need to cut it quick and short and sweet, so to speak, and you can do so and still be efficient and effective. But maybe cut out some of the flowery language, or always ask, well, to the marshal, are we doing full salutes or are we doing just short salutes? So a salute, for those who are not as familiar, and for those who are, bear with me. At the beginning of a tournament, you have two fighters on your field. You are the herald. You've already consulted with the marshal, and you are told it's time to announce the fighters. And so you have a knight on one side and you have a lord on the other. And you have the cards in hand that have their names written out. And typically it is my practice, and it is how I was taught, you announce the person with the higher rank first. So I would announce the knight first, and then I would announce the lord. Sometimes you will have a knight say to you, please do not do that. They would prefer to be just a fighter on the field. Even though they're wearing a white belt, oftentimes they will tell you, treat me as any other fighter. I am not special and I should not be afforded special treatment. So it's important, again, to know the parties that you are talking about. If you have time, you can quickly ask those things. If you do not have time, my default is announce the higher ranking person first. You can just announce them by names. If you don't know their titles, or if you're nervous, just use the name, because all of us, I'm just Magdalen. Yes, I'm Mistress of the Pelican, but if you don't know whether I like to be addressed as Mistress or Dame, you might just say, Her Excellency Magdalen. You can use cues. It's harder with fighters because you don't get coronets to denote whether they have strawberry leaves sometimes, but many of them have helms that will have their strawberry leaves on them. Many of them for the kings have helms that have the arms of the kingdom. So you can actually tell if it is certain rank from the helmet. Some fencers will paint the front of their mask, so you might be able to denote certain rank from their mask. Other clues in their garb, for example, you would know a master of defense by the three rapiers pointed in. So I always joke and say it looks like the Mercedes Benz symbol, but it's swords, obviously. So you know someone is a master of defense if they are wearing a specific fighting tabard or outfit as they are preparing to fight. So look for those clues for knowing someone's rank and title. If you don't know the difference, you can just announce them by name. And a full salute is, "Good gentlemen, please salute the crown of Adenvelt," or whatever kingdom you will. And you point them to that royalty, because the royalty move all over the field. They'll be on one side, they'll be on the other, they may be in their thrones. Every once in a while, they've skipped to the loo, and they're not on the field at all when the tournament starts. I've seen it happen. But if the marshal tells you to start, then they've been given permission to start, and you may just point into the air for your royalty, or into the air for someone who is not present. After you have them salute the crown, then you ask them to salute the one who inspires them this day, or the one whose favor they bear, or their gentle consort. Again, not knowing the names specifically of the ladies or gentlemen who are being fought for, you used kind of the overall generic of consort or the inspiration of the day. My favorite is the one who inspires you this day. And it's a little wordy, so you have to say it quickly, but say it quickly and as clearly as possible. And then after the second salute, which is to their consort, then the third salute and final salute is each to the other, or Sir Knight and Lord, my Lord, please salute one another. And they then will either just tip their sword or nod, or they often will come together and hug on the field, and pat each other on the back and make sure everybody knows that this is friendly combat. Right before the can of whoop ass is let go, it is a tournament. Obviously, they're going to be fighting for whatever the stakes of that tournament are. But again, what underlies it all is that we're doing this for fun, and we're doing this honorably and on friendly terms. Oftentimes, with the second salute to the consort, opposing fighters will go and kiss the hand or acknowledge the other gentle's consort. So that can take some time. When you are on the field as a herald, it is imperative that you pay attention to what the folks are doing. I say this from experience. I have, on occasion, been chatting with my friends on the other side of the ropes. No, you're working. You got to remember that you're on. And is this mic on? Is this mic on? You have to kind of think of it that way, and that you are live. And so when you are out there, you need to also keep your focus and try not to be distracted by other things that are happening. I have raised our son in the SCA, and on occasion, you've got that little kid that comes running out to you while you're working. Doesn't matter who the babysitter might be at the time. Sometimes you just need to stop and take care of something. I have also had it where I've had trouble with my voice. Let the marshal know if you have a delay or a problem, so that they can either swap out heralds, or so that they can give you a moment to clear your throat or address your kid and get them out of the way. I mean, in general, you don't want to interrupt the tournament. And again, you don't want to be the distraction. You want to be an enhancement to the tournament. You want to have your actions make everything prettier.
I actually did have a question about the whole notion of the consort. I know that within the crown tourney and the cornet tourneys, that it's absolutely imperative that there is a consort just by the mechanics of the game. But in situations for other tournaments, say like one of the champions tournaments or just a regular baronial tournament or something of that nature, in the event that there are people who some of them will have a consort and some of them will not, what would be the best way for a herald to handle that situation if it is something for the herald to concern themselves with at all, really?
So if the ruling noble or royalty said they want full salutes for the first round, you can still use salute the one who inspires you this day. It could be their mom. It could be their dog. It doesn't have to be a lady or a lord, for example. And it's a generic turn of phrase. So the one who inspires you doesn't have to be a girlfriend or a wife or anything of that nature. Okay, so that's one way to do it. The other is if one of the fighters has a consort and the other does not, you can then say, so they've announced and they've already saluted the baron and baroness, or they've saluted the king and queen. You can say, and at this point, the fighters may salute whom they will. And that's, again, a generic way of doing it without ever announcing any kind of connection. If you have no one whom you will address, then you don't need to as the fighter. If you do, then say, like I said, one fighter might have a consort and he'll take that moment to kiss his lady's hand and let her know he's going to fight for her. And then he comes back and the other fighter may stand at the ready, and it's okay. So whom you will is the generic term. Yes, William.
Another generic term is salute your inspiration, because most fighters find inspiration somewhere. It could be a consort, it could be the idea behind a cancer tournament or toys for kids or whatnot, but inspiration is super generic. And
Yes.
will cover perfectly the concept of a consort, but also right there, good day, sunshine, whatever.
No, I agree. I agree. Thank you very much. So, so after a full salute, for example, again in Aidenveld, the heat is a huge factor here, and it doesn't matter. We have a February tournament for Crown and a September tournament for Crown. September is almost always unbearably hot, but February can be pretty warm. Usually, I mean, our fields look like what's in this picture with Simon. The grass is kind of natty and dry, and I mean, it's Arizona. We're a desert. We do have grass, but it's usually not ideal. We don't have lush forestry or lush grasses. So what I will say to you is that if they say we only want full salutes in the first round, and from there on out do a simple salute, then it's gentlemen, please salute each the other. Gentlemen, please salute whom you will. And you only need to just do the one instead of all three. And then I find for myself that it is easier to stand outside of the field. So here on this picture, there are Eric ropes. Behind me on my background, you'll see a wooden Eric barrier. We have some wooden fencing that we use for tournaments as well. I don't know if I have any closer up shots of that, but in general, I try to stand on the outside of the field personally so that I don't have to exit the field after I've made my announcement. Sometimes, however, you need to be right there with the fighters on the field. And then, of course, the minute you are done announcing them, you need to exit the field because you're no longer you're no longer there. You don't need to be in the way. I do not know all of the kingdom's practices, But in Atenvelt, the practice is the herald never says lay on. The herald never says allay to start a rapier or fencing match. The herald leaves that to the marshal. And like I said, I think it's probably that way in most kingdoms, but everybody has a different protocol. So again, talk to your marshal so that you know what it's appropriate. In Atenvelt, you never announce the start of the fighting. You just are announcing the fighters. And so once you are done announcing the fighters, one of the turns of phrase that I use, as I was taught many moons ago, is by your honor and upon the marshal's command. Now, I do not use that in every tournament, but it is a kind of flamboyant way of saying, as soon as the marshal says you can start, you can start. And on your honor, just to remind them that they're on their honor, and to give a little flourish as you're exiting the field. Again, not something you need to say, but it's something I try to say in formal tournaments, and it seems to be accepted pretty well, because then they know, oh good, Magdalen's done talking. So
Antonio has a question.
Yes.
And again, so sorry I've been asking so many, but
I don't mind at all. I appreciate it.
one other thing that kind of popped into my head, because I know in Atenvelt the herald never says actually says lay on. Are there ever, and because of that we're establishing two personalities, one the herald and one the marshal, is there ever been a situation where, for either lack of heralds or for another reason, the marshal is the one that actually gives the commands to do the salutes and the things like that? Or is that something that if the herald is ever present, they're always going to be the one to do?
So yes, absolutely. Sometimes you wear more than one hat. And if the marshal is the herald as well, as long as basically the fighters know that that's what's going on. So generally the marshal will say, we don't have heralds today, so I will be announcing the fighters. And then everybody knows what's going on, and then the marshal does both. Because they are still the marshal, and they can make the calls on, if someone's equipment fails or whatever, the marshal job, they're wearing their marshal hat for that. In regard to that, anyone can cry hold during a tournament. Anyone. However, if you as the herald have a reason to cry hold, you better have a reason. You can't be playing around or joking around, obviously, and most people don't joke around with the word hold. Hold is, everybody stops. Someone's hit the edge of the world, perhaps, which is they hit the ropes or the wooden barrier. They're going to fall over, or they're going to hit something that's going to harm them as fighters. Sometimes there's equipment failure. We've seen elbow and knee caps go flying. We've seen shield straps break, any number of different equipment failures. If it is a fighter's equipment failure and you observe it and you're the herald and you see the marshal hasn't seen it, I go tell the marshal. Again, this is part of paying attention to what's happening on the field and watching and keeping your wits about you as a herald. If the equipment failure is happening and they're right in front of me and they're about to hit me with their weapon, I might cry hold. I think I've only ever done it twice in 30 years. So I don't do it often. I think once we have had a little child run onto a field and the fighters would never have seen that kid. And the parent was horrified. It happens on occasion. I think that was one of the times I cried hold. But I was among 20 other people shouting at the same time. So hold is appropriate, but in general, if you can make sure the marshal is also, they're supposed to be doing their job as well. So, the idea is safety. The idea is to protect all people in the field, not just the fighters, not just the spectators, but everyone. So again, that's just a little thing in the back of your mind. Anyone can cry hold. Just make sure you have a good reason, especially if it is a contested tournament such as a crown, I try to still go to the marshal as quickly as possible, but almost always they catch it before I do. So,
Morales from Drakenwald has a question.
yes.
Well, I just wanted to answer from another kingdom with different culture that we actually usually have the same people be marshals as heralds at our lists.
Nice.
Just because I expect, because we have a lack of heralds, and you can't have a tournament without marshals, right? So so they kind of do both jobs at our tournaments.
And thank you for that. And instead of a herald mace or heraldic mace, oftentimes the marshals will then use their staffs, which they also, use for marshaling, but they can indicate the victor with their staff, and or use again a general direction where the nobility or royalty are with their staff. So marshals have tools of their trade, and it can be interchangeably used as the way a herald would use a herald's staff or a herald's mace. All right, so I asked the one question about introductions, but oftentimes in final rounds of any tournament, in Adenveld, Crown Tournament is the piece de resistance of the tournaments, essentially. It is the biggest gig for heralds, and generally each fighter will have a herald introduce them in the final round. Sometimes we have a round robin, so there will be 3 fighters in the final round, and they usually, the best 2 out of 3, and so the elimination still happens. So sometimes there are 3 heralds at the final round. I mentioned this earlier, but the way that Simon and I have learned to prepare is we probably have heralded for, between us, probably 10 different kings. But when our friends are fighting in Crown Tournament and we know we may be called upon to introduce the fighter and his consort in the final round, we often prepare before the tournament ever happens. We will go to the order of precedence, look up all their awards, know what all of their accolades and recognitions are, take those notes in advance. Simon has also been known to do it on the fly, and he'll pull out his cell phone or his tablet and look up the order of precedence right there at sight so that he can copy down the information that he needs. But the idea being is that this is the big show, this is the big moment, and whoever wins is going to be the next king of your realm. So you want it to look good, and you want them to look good. Oftentimes, everyone's personality comes to play in this sort of thing. So one of the things that I did in the handout, but I'm just going to go over briefly here, is if you are called upon to announce someone in a final round of a titled tournament, whether it's Crown or some other competition, you can go over with them a few quick questions to get the mood of what they want you to do. As I said, there are different styles that heralds have, but you can find out, would they prefer it to be short and sweet? Do they want your speech to honor the consort in whole or in part? Sometimes they don't want you to talk about the fighter at all. They want you to talk about their consort, the beautiful lady. She is the reason for their getting up in the morning and for them to be in that tournament. And so you need to talk about her. Again, preparing in advance sometimes will help you in that regard, knowing who the consorts are. Do they want the speech to cause their opponent to tremble in their boots, i.e., they are a badass fighter and you are announcing their prowess and their amazing skill, all right? And the fact that they're about to wipe the floor with their opponent. Sometimes they want an intimidating presence. And through your voice, the might and the ferocity of your fighter should come through. All right. Do they want your speech to be flamboyant and sound very period-esque? Do they want the speech to be humorous or lighthearted? Twins, womans, countrymen, show me your ears, and whatever, and be silly. We've had a variety of those. I mean, part of it is, again, you're not just announcing your fighter, you're announcing to and for the populace. And so if it is to get everybody laughing or get everybody happy, you do what your boss asks you to do. And if you're versatile, you can do multiple different types of introductions. Do they want a speech that includes all of their achievements? So you've seen me in the photographs I've shown with my little notebook. I have been known to write down every award someone has, but I have gotten away from that. And the reason I've gotten away from that is it's the fighting tournament. Does that future king want everyone to know all of their arts awards? Maybe they do. They want people to know they're versatile. They're not just a fighter. They're not just a stick jock. So they may say to you, make sure all of my arts awards and my laurel are listed when you announce me. So you do what you're asked. And you can tie their awards into your speech. You don't just have to say, he is a member of the Order of the Laurel. You can say, and I'm using Simon, he's my husband, I know his awards and accolades. And one that is quite prestigious in our kingdom is Lion of Atenveld. So I would want to either lead with his high honor as a Lion of Atenveld, or end with his high honor of being a Lion of Atenveld. But he has been Baron of Tariskathir. He is a member of the Order of the Laurel. He has a Fleur de Soleil and a Flower of the Desert. And I can go on, and he has all the baronial awards that he has. And so you can list those things, but it's usually boring to just list out all the awards. So what we try to do is to personalize your introduction to that person and to their awards. And you can say, comes now upon the field, Master Simon McKirker. This amazing fighter is not only known for his prowess upon the field of rapier, but he is also a hard-suit fighter. His versatility extends to the archery range, even though no archery is happening, but you want to throw it out there. And if he had an azure archer, you would say, it extends to the archery range, and his azure archer eye is used as he will bring his sword to this field. That prowess spreads far and wide. His artistry as a bard and magician will show all fighters upon this field that he shall make them disappear. And you work with whatever you know of that fighter. Last but not least, going back to heraldry and the basis of what we do, does the fighter want your speech to include the blazon of their coat of arms? For many people, their arms and that achievement of arms. So they have an award of arms, usually. Many have grants of arms, and a number have patents of arms. So being able and capable of blazon, which is the language of heraldry, speaking forsoothly and using the tinctures in heraldry, and explaining what that tabard is to all far and sundry. Sometimes you have time for that. Again, in a final round at Crown, they often will give you a broad leeway to do that. So I try to take advantage of that. All right, this was, as I said, with Edward and his second reign. So we have Simon here. This is the sword oath. If you are a titled herald for a king, you're going to have a greater job at a crown tournament oftentimes, and that will include administering a sword oath. This moment was captured by the photographer just as Simon introduced the fighter, and we had a monsoon shower. You see the clouds in the background. Lightning and thunder cracked right after he spoke, and that's why he rose his arms out to the side, because it just was a fortuitous moment that he said something about they will tremble at the sight of the fighter, and then the thunder clapped, and Simon, triumphant as herald, raised his arms and his staff, and there we go, and the king's banner is behind him. Sadly, our fighter did not win that day, but it was a wonderful introduction. And again, on this photo, you'll see the wooden Eric walls. Simon is right smack dab in the middle of the field because it is the final round and all the populace is surrounding. A titled herald will also administer the prince's oath. So Simon is kneeling down, and the prince and the king are holding the prince's crown, and Simon has the written prince's oath because the guy just got done fighting. He's still out of breath, he's sweating bullets, and he's exhilarated, but he doesn't have that oath memorized. So if you are a herald and it's your job and you want to always assist, have in your herald's book whatever the prince's oath is, and the princess's oath if the kingdom calls for both, and so that you're at the ready. If you are a good herald, you get to be the crown herald, and this is Simon for Thomas and Elora at Pinzik, wearing the king's tabard, and announcing the crowns at Pinzik is a wonderful thing. Simon got to do it, I didn't, but I got to watch, and it was amazing. So, you know, having those moments at our inter-kingdom wars, you're going to announce royalty, and also at tournaments at inter-kingdom wars, it is great to be flamboyant and show off the prowess of your royalty, and share with other heralds because you get a chance to interact with them. That's me again with a notebook looking serious and an indoor event. And me with the Kingdom Herald's book many moons ago with a very fancy hat. And I put this one in because A, I look pretty good in the picture, and B, this goes towards watch what you wear, because that headdress got in the way. It's hard to work if you've got capes. If you ever remember the animated Pixar film, The Incredibles, no capes. Capes and cloaks are wonderful, but if they're going to get in your way of working, you might want to use a shorter cloak or something you can sweep out of the way. Keep that in mind. Ultimately, I always say have fun with it. Definitely introduce your friends, practice introducing your family. That gives you practice. And I want to thank you all so much for your attendance. These Zoom inter-kingdom collegians are new to me, but I think it's wonderful. And thank you all for coming from so far away to our class, from your living room, I guess. But I enjoyed teaching, and I hope I helped somehow.